Hello everyone, welcome to another Sessionwire Live. Today we are off to a screaming start compared to the last couple weeks. Figured out some technical issues that we were having, and here we are. Thanks for joining me on this Wednesday, morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Be sure to say hi in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. I always love hearing from everybody in the comments. Any questions, any you catch me doing something weird, with my setup or routing or whatever. Love seeing it in the comments. That interaction is what these are all about. Today's webinar will be brief. It's you're not going to find any kind of groundbreaking secrets in this one. It's just meant to give a quick look at an alternate setup of Pro Tools alongside Sessionwire when you're streaming audio out to somebody that you're working with. So without further ado, we will just dive right in here. Typically in a kind of a remote working situation, we find that a lot of users just broadcast an entire mix, the same mix that they're listening to locally across Sessionwire using the Sessionwire Send plugin on a master fader or on a dedicated mix aux, that type of thing. But in other situations, like when you're doing remote ADR or overdubs of some kind, or if you just want to send a different mix across the Sessionwire connection, setting up a headphone cue type mix in Pro Tools is the way to go. And I'm going to show you how I like to do that. Saptech Musical, what's going on from New York? I'm assuming you're involved in musicals, Broadway perhaps. Big fan of New York. I've only been once, but it was fantastic. Loved every minute of it. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy to answer. If you haven't checked Sessionwire out, go to www.sessionwire.com. Sign up for your free account. Check it out. Shoot me an email, brendan@sessionwire.com. If you want to connect and test some things, let me know. I have here a Pro Tools session. It's just some drums. As usual, I'm a drummer, so I always have one of these laying around ready to go. Basic session. I've got all of my drums here, all of my individual microphones laid out. They're all routed out my physical output 1 and 2 that has a master fader on it. I've got a reverb here, pretty typical. If I play this, you're not going to hear it because it's not routed to the stream yet. I'm going to turn Do Not Disturb on really quick. So yeah, this session, pretty simple. If I wanted to stream the entire mix across to somebody on the other side of the Sessionwire connection, I would simply place the Sessionwire Send plugin on my master fader, and if I hit play, I've got to change a setting in here really quick. Make sure that this is all connected. Pretty straightforward. So the mix coming across the Sessionwire connection, the mix that you're hearing on the live stream, is exactly what I hear here in my studio coming out of my headphones. Or if I was listening to my monitors, it would be exactly what's coming out of my monitors. If I wanted to send a different mix than what I'm hearing across the Sessionwire connection, say, whoever wants to hear a little bit more kick drum than I'm hearing, or whoever is on the other side doesn't want to hear the reverb that I have on in my session here, I would set up a little bit differently. So I'm going to get rid of this plug-in here. And this is how I like to do it. You can choose to do it a different way if you'd like. I'm going to go to Setup, I/O, head to the Bus tab. I'm going to create a new path. It's going to be stereo. I'm going to create the subpaths as well. That's just something that I do. And I'm going to create a bus called Sessionwire Send, or Sessionwire Mix, or whatever you want to call it. I call it Sessionwire Send because it corresponds to the Sessionwire Send plugin. So create this bus, go OK, and on every one of these channels, I'm going to select all of these channels, the reverb, all of the microphone channels, everything except the master fader. I'm going to click Option, or press and hold Option Shift, click on a Send. Doesn't matter which one it is. I'm using Send E here. I'm going to go to my bus menu, and of course it's not going to be in this one. It's going to be in this other one. I'm going to select Sessionwire Send, this bus that I created, as the send for all these channels. And if I click, it'll populate every single channel with a send to the Sessionwire Send bus. I'm also going to create a new stereo master fader called Sessionwire Send. This master fader I'm going to set to govern the Sessionwire Send bus that I've created. Okay, so this is similar to how you would set up a headphone queue. If you're working like locally in a studio, you're sending headphone mixes out to people in a live room. This is how I would do it. I would create master faders for every single mix for every single person, and create a different send for each person here. I mean, that's one way to do it, depending on the system you have. If you have an Aviom system, it's a little bit different. The Behringer system is a little bit different. But for me locally, if I was to create different mixes, I would create a different master fader so that I can put different processing on that master fader depending on what that person wants to hear in terms of EQ or limiting or compression or whatever. So this Sessionwire Send master fader is where I'm going to insert the Sessionwire Send plugin. Great. And now, if I hit play, you're not going to hear anything, and anybody on the other side of the Sessionwire connection isn't going to hear anything, because all of these sends here are all set to -infinity. There's nothing going to this new bus that I've created with the Sessionwire Send plugin on it. And for all you Pro Tools people that don't know keyboard shortcuts or aren't familiar with this little function here, the expanded sends. If I click expanded sends for Send E, it's going to expand all of these sends so I can actually see a little fader and adjust this new separate mix that's going to Sessionwire without having to click on every one of these and open up the little floating fader business here. So here we go. Something important to note as well, all of these faders, all of these sends here are post fader right now. So if I were to dial up a quick mix here, if I dial in some kick drum and some snare drum just for fun, and because you'll notice this difference, if I hit play and I start monkeying around with the main faders here, they're going to affect the mix that's being sent using these sends. So if I hit play, okay, this could be a good thing. This could be a bad thing, depending on what you're trying to send across to the other side of the Sessionwire connection. For me, if I'm going to set up a separate mix for somebody, I most likely am going to take all of these channels and make them pre-fader. So anything that I do in my Pro Tools session with these main faders is not going to affect what the other person on the other side of the call is going to hear. Again, that's how I would do it. If I was just going to leave everything post fader, I might as well just leave everything as it is and create or just instantiate the send plugin on my main master fader. But if I'm going to create a separate mix, I would create a separate mix and make it all pre-fader. So, you know, dial in a little kick out, a little snare bottom, some of the toms, some of the overheads a little bit here, some hats, a little bit of the room, a couple of these little toy microphones I have here, the mono overhead, and I'm going to leave the reverb off because that was the point of creating this separate mix in the first place. I didn't want to send this reverb across Sessionwire. So if I play this now, it should sound super dry, you know, no reverb. Oh boy, almost had the spinning wheel of death there. Super dry, also very quiet. So I might instantiate some kind of a limiter on here. You know, we're working potentially in a live kind of recording situation, so I might use the stock Pro Tools limiter. I'll just open this send plugin up again here so we can see the meters. So we'll just make this a little bit louder. I think. Ratio of 100%. Great, so I'm not really doing any gain reduction with that limiter. I'm just making it louder so it streams across to the other side of the Sessionwire connection a little bit louder. Again, there's no reverb in here. If I wanted to send more reverb than what I'm hearing locally, then I can do that. I can adjust this send right here on the reverb channel to the Sessionwire send master fader / bus that's being governed by this master fader. So here's no reverb. This would be the same amount of reverb that I'm hearing locally. And here's 12 dB more reverb than what I'm hearing locally. Okay. All right. There we go. That's how I would set up my headphone Q mix in Pro Tools. Again, you know, it depends on your hardware setup. If you're using Pro Tools HDX, you've got some DSP outboard, your latency might be really low. You can use pretty heavy plugins and get away with it. I use everything natively on my machine. So typically this is way too high a buffer size for me to do any recording locally and stream it across Sessionwire without it being really annoying for me here. So typically would be working at a very small buffer size. 128 samples is usually what I work with when I'm tracking drums here. The plugins that I use will be pretty low on processor usage. You know, I've got a bunch of the plugin alliance stuff here. This isn't what I would be using if I was tracking drums locally. I would use like the SSL, so the solid state logic channel strip 2, I think is the new one. On everything for EQ compression, I would use lighter reverbs than Valhalla. Valhalla is still not that heavy. LX480 is a little bit heavier than I would use as well. I would use, definitely wouldn't use Sonox limiter on the master fader. I would use the Pro Tools stock limiter just to get by while I'm tracking. And I would do all of my monitor mixing directly in Pro Tools. So if I have a band in here recording, I'm creating these separate monitor mixes for them. They're, you know, the Sessionwire send mix would go across to somebody. If I wanted to create like a monitor mix for somebody named Bob, I'd do the exact same thing here. Get rid of these two. Create another send here to a bus. Doesn't matter which one it is, bus 31, 32. I'm going to right click on this. Sorry, I'm going to go Shift Option. Right click, rename, Bob Q. Boom, there's Bob's Q, same thing. If you go up to View, Expanded Sends, and I click on Send D, it's going to expand Bob's monitor mix out. And again, Option Shift, click the P, that puts everything into pre-fader. So if I make, changes to Bob's mix here, he'll hear them. If I make changes to my main faders here, that he won't hear those changes. His mix will stay the same, barring any changes in gain structure in my preamps. Derrick Leverington, hello from Saskatchewan. Oh, neighbor, what's going on? My wife's family's from Saskatchewan. We spend a lot of time out there. These sessions have been helpful for me. This is great. I love to hear that. That's what these are all about. Lots more coming down the pipe. I will tell you about them shortly. I believe next week I'm doing something about recording drums. So that should be fun. What model of Mac am I running? Believe it or not, it's a 2010 Mac Pro 5.1. It's the big old cheese grater Mac. There's a guy in Toronto that through Kijiji was refurbishing these things. So reached out to him, and he built this thing for me. So it's 12 core, dual 6 core processors, 96 gigabytes of RAM. It's got two M.2 drives in it in the PCIe slot, so the storage is really fast, and then it's got the 4 hard drive bays still open. So I've got some hard drives in there for recording or storing media and samples and things like that. Good video card. It's an RX 580, so on my Windows partition I can play Red Dead Redemption 2 on pretty good settings. And then I've got a USB 3.0 card in there. I think now it's easier than before to put Thunderbolt in there. You can buy a pre-flashed Thunderbolt card to put in a PCIe slot as well. So they're still great computers. This thing runs amazingly. It's running Mojave 10.14.6, knock on wood, no issues in the last long time. So yeah, that's what I'm using. I believe I'm going to be getting my hands on a new Mac Mini with an M1 in it in the next couple weeks here. So expect to be doing some streams from there, some demos of some DAWs, and possibly some new Sessionwire functionality, maybe a sneak peek or two at things coming. I wish I could show you what's coming. Holy smokes. Yeah, it's going to change the landscape of remote recording for sure. So thanks for the question, Derrick. Appreciate it. What part of Saskatchewan are you from? Yeah, be interesting. I'm through there quite a bit. I'm playing in Saskatchewan a few times over the next little while in Bengoff and Raymore, Estevan. Could be another place too. Okay, anybody have any questions about anything that I've been over here? I can go back and go over things. I can maybe expand a little bit on what I have done, although there's not really much to expand on. To sum up, what I usually do, I'll go to Setup, I/O. I'll create a bus, and the bus that I've created is called Sessionwire Send. You can create it, I can relabel it Sessionwire Q, might be a better label. Sessionwire Q. If I go OK, it's going to change the name of that here and all the way across. It's now called Sessionwire Q. Sessionwire Q will be the name of this master fader, and it's got the Sessionwire Send plugin on it. And now I can create this pre-fader mix right here using the expanded sends right here. Ooh, wow. Yeah, modding, that's something that I just didn't want to get into, was modding this thing myself, getting a 4.1 and updating it and flashing the firmware, and it's just, I had no time. I barely had time to get this thing up and running. I installed Boot Runner so I can flip between Windows and Mac OS, and man, that took forever. Latest M1 Pro Max in a MacBook Pro. Yeah, that... one day, they just announced the M2s. I think once the M2s are out, I'm going to have to pull the trigger on one for myself for a kind of an on-the-go machine. Regina, Amazing. The city that rhymes with fun. A little bit of a Canadian inside joke for anybody that's not from Canada on the stream. There we have it. This is how I set up my headphone cues in Pro Tools. And, you know, of course, in the mix view here, we have more sends. Want to see from a previous session, I have a Sessionwire send cue set up here. So to get rid of that, select all these channels, press and hold Shift and Option, click here and go no send, and it all goes away. But you can create up to 10 different cues here depending on what you're working on, and of course more if you do some other, you know, expanded kind of routing and things like that. But for now, I think this is going to do it for this stream. Very kind of straightforward. There are going to be lots of these. Oh, pre and post fader. Explain more. Happy to. This is what it's all about. I love these questions. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of Bob's cue mix here because it's just adding to the clutter. I'm going to get rid of the expanded sends on D so everybody can see its view expanded sends, and click on the ones you want to close. I'm also going to get rid of those sends. Okay, so let us have a look at these here. I'm going to bring all of these down here again. I'm going to demonstrate this with only the overhead microphones, okay? So I'm going to put all of these into post fader, okay? So post fader in stream pre-fader, need or post. Can you clarify your question, Saptak? In stream pre-fader, need or post. Okay, yeah. Clarify your question. I'll go on with what I'm kind of explaining here. So here's my hi-hat channel. If I play this audio, you're not going to hear anything because I've set all of these sends to 0. Every fader that's adjusting volume to the Sessionwire send plugin is set to 0. So I'm going to play this. You don't hear anything. I hear it because it's still playing out of every one of these channels, output 1 and 2, and it's hitting my master fader, and I can adjust what I'm hearing with that. If I wanted you to hear the overheads, I would grab this little send right here, this fader for this send, and I would start bringing it up, and you can start hearing the overheads. Okay? So, because this send right here for the overheads is post fader, meaning post this fader, this send right here to the Sessionwire send plugin comes after this fader. If I move this fader, you're going to hear that change happening. Okay? This is in post fader. So play. Okay, so you heard me adjusting the overhead volume by grabbing this fader and moving it up and down. Now this can be a problem. As you probably heard, it probably went into crazy distortion because this fader, the send right here, is set to unity. It's set to 0. Oh, can't see my screen anymore. Jeez, I hate that. Let's try this one. Oh, pardon me. I was going to sneeze. Thanks, Derrick. I have a little... I can see what I'm streaming out, and I didn't even look at it. So let's try this again. One more time. Here we go. This right here, the overheads, this channel right here, this is the send for the overheads to the Sessionwire plugin, to my Sessionwire cue. So if I hit play and I grab this fader, you're going to hear the overheads come up in volume. Okay. The overheads are being sent to Sessionwire by this fader right here. I've set this fader to unity, which means that you're going to hear it at the exact same level that I've set it here, so minus 15 dB, except I got this limiter on the Sessionwire cue, so it's making it louder. So if I grab this fader right here, my main fader that adjusts what I'm hearing, I'm going to move this up and down, and you're going to hear what happens. Okay, so you're hearing the overheads go up and down in volume as I'm moving this fader. So I'm hearing the volume changes, you're hearing the volume changes just by my moving this fader right here. Now, because this is set to unity, and this is set to -15, and I've got this limiter on here, if I go up any higher than where it is, it's going to kick into distortion as it hits this limiter harder. If this limiter wasn't here, it'd go into digital distortion, because it would be going over on this master fader and hitting this send plugin way too hot. So if I click pre-fader and I grab this fader now, you're not going to hear any changes because the send to the Sessionwire plugin is now coming before my main fader here. So I can adjust my volume and it's not going to affect what you're hearing. So here we go. Now it's also hitting this limiter way too hot now because it's now at unity, not unity -15 like it was before. So I'm going to just adjust this limiter a little bit, just kind of open it up so it's just catching things right at the top. Here we go. Try again. So you can't hear any of the changes that I'm making because this is in pre-fader. Now your question in terms of when you should be using pre-fader and post-fader in a streaming situation, that's entirely up to you. It depends on your the project that you're streaming, what you're trying to get at with the stream. Usually when I'm streaming, I'm not using a headphone cue mix to do it. I will just put the Sessionwire Send plugin on my master fader and stream the entire mix across. When I'm tracking drums, I'm not streaming to the internet. But when I'm tracking drums, most often I will set up kind of a stream queue just like this, except I won't stream every individual microphone. I won't put the send on every individual microphone like I have here. I usually have some stepping down through some bussing and some summing, so I'll put the sends on those auxes instead. I think the best way to kind of get into streaming is to not use the headphone cue mix and just put the send plugin on your master fader. And then if you decide that you need to build a custom mix to stream out to YouTube or Facebook or whoever you're connected with, then you can create the headphone mix. And from there, you need to decide whether you want that person to hear the changes that you're making in real time, or you want them to hear a completely different mix that is completely separate from anything that you do with your faders here, if that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, please tell me, and I can explain a little bit more. Like I said, this isn't like a deep dive into like Pro Tools functionality and things like that, but I think most often what's trickiest for people is wrapping their heads around this new kind of workflow. You know, it's not often that it wasn't often before the pandemic that we were working over the internet with people with audio in real time. You know, you usually fly somewhere to do a session or have your friends over in your house to do things. And, you know, even now I find working with people in my own city, they're just, you know, like, let's connect on Sessionwire for you to track drums. I don't want to come over. And, you know, they're more comfortable listening in their own room. So when I'm tracking drums for those people, I'll set up this kind of like custom mix for them, and it sounds pretty similar to what I'm hearing here, except I don't send like the click to them. I don't want them to hear the click while I'm tracking drums. They don't need to hear that because oftentimes it's, you know, pretty loud and distracting. They don't hear the music. They're more paying attention to is Is he playing on the click? Do we need to quantize and that kind of thing? So like Zoom Stream. Yeah, so again, the same point. I'll make the same point. You need to decide whether you need to stream a custom mix across Zoom and whether or not you want the changes that you're making with your main faders. Doesn't matter which DAW, whether you want the faders to adjust what you're sending across. So yeah, when you're talking over Zoom, again, I mean, it depends how you've got things set up in your studio. If my voice, this is Brendan Vox, I'll create a little audio track. We'll make it a different color just for fun. And let's say that my vocal is going to appear here on this track. So this is going to get really distracting really quickly. So I'll try to make sure that it doesn't double up through the stream and things like that. But if I wanted my voice to go across the Sessionwire stream, I'm going to, if I'm going to set up this bus here, set this to Unity. Now you're hearing my voice through my microphone straight into the stream, and you're hearing it through the Sessionwire Send plugin. So how am I going to do this without causing all kinds of issues here? Let's try this. So now you should hear me once, and I'll flip back to my monitor here. So I've created just an audio track in Pro Tools that sees my microphone as its input, and I've created this little send that's sending it out to the Sessionwire Send plugin. So if I wanted to make changes in the volume that I'm hearing locally with everything post fader, if I make adjustments here, you lost my voice there. You can't hear my voice if I'm adjusting this fader. Like if I didn't want to hear myself locally and I muted it, if I muted this channel, you wouldn't hear me. But if I put it in pre-fader and I muted it, you can still hear my voice. I can't hear it locally because it's muted right here. But because this is pre-fader, it's sending my voice to the Sessionwire Send plugin before any of these controls here. So hopefully that makes sense. We have another question here, so I will get to that. Lamar, I seem to be having a problem with the Sessionwire Send plugin showing in Pro Tools. Is it supposed to be an automatic download? So if you have installed Sessionwire, the plugins will have been installed with it. Now, the question is, which version of Pro Tools are you using? So if you can answer that in the comments, I can answer your question right away. Typically, the Sessionwire Send plugin, not typically, all the time, the Sessionwire Send plugin and the Sessionwire Receive plugin are stereo plugins, so you have to insert them on a stereo aux or master fader or audio channel. Has to be stereo. So if I go to a mono channel here and I go to search for the Sessionwire plugins, only the Sessionwire TalkBack plugins show up because they're mono. Okay. Vice versa, if I hit like a stereo master here and I go to look for the Sessionwire plugins, only the Sessionwire Send and Receive plugins will show up and not the TalkBack plugins because the Sessionwire Send and Receive plugins are stereo. So Sessionwire Send and Receive, any of the high quality audio that you want to send has to be on a stereo aux or master fader or etc. All of the TalkBack plugins are mono only and will only appear on mono tracks / auxes / master faders. Does that make sense, Lamar? Let me know. Happy to clarify for sure. What else can we touch on here before we call it? If you're just joining, or if you just recently joined, please head to www.sessionwire.com. Hit Get Sessionwire. Throw your email in there. It'll start downloading right away. Install Sessionwire. You get free access to the video stream and the TalkBack stream. So essentially like any kind of Zoom, Google Meets kind of functionality, that's free. You can connect to anybody and have a little poke around in the Sessionwire app here. Make sure your talkback meter is moving. Just set up your talkback stream like you would a normal Zoom call. And then once you've upgraded to the artist level features, the high quality audio stream unlocks, and you can stream your HQ audio across to anybody that you're connected with, and vice versa. And only one person in a Sessionwire call needs to be updated. Ultimate, no, I mean version number, like 12.6, 12, 11, 10, etc. If you can let me know which version it is, that would be good. Yeah. Do any of the other plugins show up? Yes or no? If some of the other plugins show up, then you're fine. You just have to go to a stereo channel and look for the Sessionwire send/receive plugins. Also, make sure that you're using an operating system that's up to date. High Sierra is the minimum. Duh. Yeah. Sorry. I should have clarified. Version number will help a lot. And if it doesn't, then we should connect. Shoot me an email, support@sessionwire.com or brendan@sessionwire.com. More than happy to connect, get you up and running. That goes for anybody on this thread. If you head over to sessionwire.com, download Sessionwire, install it, you want to connect and test things, throw some audio across the internet, more than happy to do that. Nothing is better than hearing some audio come from somewhere else in the world, and it sounds like it's coming from your own DAW. It's the craziest thing. I've connected to people in Australia, India, Russia. Opening DAW to make sure I have no other questions. Perfect. Yeah, please do. I have a feeling that's all it is you just need to look in this on a stereo channel and insert the Sessionwire send or receive plugins. Lots of big changes coming to how Sessionwire works. Just a little update for people on the stream. We are working on version 3.0 at the moment. The connectivity and the number of callers you can have in a Sessionwire call is going up astronomically. It's going to be absolutely bonkers what you can do with Sessionwire. Sending URL to people wherever they are just to have them join a call. If you want to do webinars, you can have up to 1,000 people in a Sessionwire call, depending on the Sessionwire plan you're on, of course, which we are currently working through. Yeah. There may be sneak peeks coming. Yeah, Lamar, let me know how you make out there. I'm going to start wrapping things up here. So let me pull up a calendar. Okay, so next week we will be doing a stream regarding remote drum tracking with Pro Tools. So I'm going to be showing how I set up my Pro Tools session to track drums from my studio here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Very excited about that. I love tracking drums remotely for people, especially through Sessionwire. It's kind of a shift in paradigm. A lot of people are used to just waiting for Dropbox folders with multi-tracks in it, but I much prefer to have the artist or producer on the other side of a screen listening in real time to what I'm doing. Hey, that microphone, move it here. Hey, this tuning on this drum needs to change. Hey, try this snare drum or this pair of hi-hats or whatever. It happens in real time. You get the session done way faster than if you were waiting for revisions or notes to come across after sending your tracks to a producer. So next week, remote tracking drums. The week after is going to be off. I'm on the road, unfortunately, so that will be off. We're back June 29th. I'll be doing a demo of creating headphone QMix in Logic Pro. If you're a Logic Pro user, please join me for that. The week after that, I'm going to be giving some tips and tricks on how to build out your home studio on a budget. Sound absorption, soundproofing, studio furniture like this desk, this beautiful, glorious sound studio desk that I've recently upgraded to, audio interfaces, microphones, where to find deals, all of that kind of stuff. Very much looking forward to getting into that as well. So the next couple of weeks are going to be great. Please join me. Derrick, thanks for having an ARM version. Yes, really looking forward to Avid doing the same. I hope so. It is hard to keep up with that habit, I'll tell you